So we have on the panel Kelly Ross, who is our VP of Enterprise, and she's joined by Bronson Tubb from Omicron, Justin Wheeler from Fun. Oh, so please. Also, Justin Wheeler from Fundraise, we just heard him. Kevin Mooney from Bandcamp. And Fareed Jawed from Ola. Great. Kelly.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And thank you all for joining us for the customer panel. As Peter said, this is a panel of Spreedly customers. So we get to do a little bit of shameless promotion, I guess, for this part of the programming. Really glad to have all of you guys here with us today, and interested in hearing your experience, the problems you were trying to solve that brought you to Spreedly, and what your experience has been in working with Spreedly. So Peter has done the introductions. We heard a little bit from Justin and Kevin earlier today about their companies. So why don't we give Bronson and Fareed a chance to introduce themselves, talk about their roles, and a little bit about their companies. So start with Bronson from Omicron Media.
Right. Thanks, Kelly. Bronson Tubb from Omicron Media. We're online retail subscription business, different online services. Not important, we can talk about them later, but generally, we've grown through acquisition of different retail properties and integrated them into our enterprise. That includes billing systems, payment processing, operational platforms, and what have you when you're integrating properties. So that's been really my focus as VP of Engineering. And through that acquisition pipeline, I kind of inherited payment processing, which I'm sure many of you have as well in some form or another, and I think that's actually something we might talk about, so I'll leave it at that.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Fareed. I work for Ola. Ola is India's largest ride-hailing company, like Uber or Lyft, and we are expanding globally. We're live in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, and are looking to expand to a lot more countries. And we've recently partnered with Spreedly. I look after payments and fraud.
All right, thank you. So Fareed, I'm going to come back to you. You mentioned you're focused on launching your ride-hailing service in many, many different countries, a growing number of countries and markets. Can you talk to some of the unique challenges that you found in entering new markets, both expected and unexpected challenges, and how your team is addressing those challenges?
Sure. Great question, Kelly. So basically, getting into a new country or a region, you really need to know, the regulatory landscape very well. There are a lot of countries outside of the U.S., including Asia and parts of Europe, that are highly mandated for two-factor authentication. So the payment experience is a bit different than what we used to in the US. So we need to have interesting solves for that. There are opportunities with optimizing the authentication experience that we need to look for. And with 3DS 2.0 coming along and strong customer authentication in Europe, the challenge just gets a lot bigger, but hopefully will be simpler because it's all going to be based on risk authentication. The other thing that is always, no matter how well prepared you are, is the fraud patterns are very different in different countries. So, you need to be really watchful for that, and it helps to have the right signals that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, you mentioned earlier some of the unique challenges you guys had with different currencies. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I think there are sort of two things. One is that when we're doing payouts, we just have to be sure to stay cash flow positive in about 20 currencies. So it's not challenging, really. It's just a matter of making sure that we have tools for our ops people to, make sure we have enough money in each account for each currency that we can do payouts for all of our sellers. The other, the specific challenge that Spreedly helped us with was that we could only, upon doing a reference transaction with Payflow, the limitation was that we could only do a subsequent transaction in the same currency. Because of that limitation, we had to find a way pretty quickly to vault a card and do subsequent transactions in any currency. And so by storing sensitive data with Spreedly and then templating that, our API calls, we were able to pretty easily do a vaulted card, store a card, have a great fan experience, and transact in every currency we needed.
Thank you. So Justin and Bronson, I know you guys have also had some experience with international expansion and working in different countries. Do you have anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I mean, so our 10th customer was actually a $50 million nonprofit in Australia. And this was, several weeks after going to market. And, we wouldn't have been able to do that if we weren't using, obviously, Spreedly's API. And essentially, we were able to create flexibility around the way our platform reports from a currency perspective, but also the way that you can raise in whatever native currency that you want, or to give the donor the option to choose which currency do you want to give in. So that appeal, a lot of organizations that are, over the $10 million annual budget mark are raising outside of the United States. And so being able to offer an international solution around international payments was definitely, it gave us an edge over our competitors who were more focused in Northern America. So I would say that flexibility and the ease of actually implementing that gave us success early on in the international market.
So two things. We found that one-time payment methods are much more popular in Europe. So operating a subscription business on a one-time payment method where you can't rebill is difficult. And you really got to manage the communication cycle with the customers to bring them back, to make sure that they're aware that their service is going to expire, and manage that whole process with them. That's more of on the marketing side. On the operational side, clearing cards in different countries, you have a very different experience based on where your merchant bank is. So to the extent that you can identify your more popular regions and establish a merchant ID with a bank in that region, your authorization rates will, or could, it's all obviously dependent on the book of business, improve if you're processing locally. So the closer your merchant bank is to your issuing bank, the better your processing results can be. And I frankly overlooked that for a while until we actually really got into it and found, it does make a difference. So consider it if you want to improve your authorization rates.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to kick back to you, Bronson. We talked about some of the unique challenges of geo expansion and accepting payments in various countries. Was that the original problem you were looking to solve when you came to Spreedly, or was that something that was kind of a downstream benefit? What was the original business problem you were looking to solve?
Well, that was a bonus, being able to hit multiple gateways. When we started working with Spreedly, the focus of the market was gateway aggregation, which that was the bonus for us. What was the most valuable at the time was actually outsourcing our card data storage. So using the vault. After acquiring a couple of businesses, dealing with various evolutions of PCI compliance in those businesses, and managing a CD of our own and going through a level 1 DSS audit annually. It's a real pain. Everyone here knows. It's difficult. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of effort, and it's not our core business. So, taking valuable engineering effort, valuable operation experience, and dealing with the weight, the friction involved in ongoing cart and checkout process development while managing our own CDE just didn't make a lot of sense anymore. And when the solution that Spreedly offered came along, and we could outsource that, eliminate our own audit, improve our velocity of delivery of our actual customer-facing product, that just made a lot of sense. So that's why we originally jumped on board with Spreedly, and then being able to address other gateways that we didn't have in play at that time was really that was the bonus.
Yeah. Thank you. Sure. Thank you. So, Justin, you mentioned earlier kind of the landscape of payments has changed since you've been working. How have you been able to respond to changes in your business model as, kind of the payments industry has changed and the landscape has changed?
Sure. So, I mean, specifically within the nonprofit vertical, you have a new demographic of donors that are inheriting by 2020 over $10 trillion of capital. And so you have one of the wealthiest generations coming of age that actually has a lot of capital to give, yet they're not being engaged in ways that are familiar to them. And so, what that's caused us to do as a company is to really look at, one of the many different features that we offer, specifically on the payment side, is, well, how do we ensure that our customer base, the nonprofits using Fundraise, have the tools to actually engage and to interact through all these different, payment methods. One of the trends we saw early on was, for example, crypto. And we saw specific organizations, specifically human rights organizations, wanting to collect donations, depending on the different issues they were working on, the different countries that they were working on, collect donations through cryptocurrency. And so we immediately responded and were able to give that option to our customer base. And so I think it's the whenever a new trend emerges, it's not having to build a new integration with a specific gateway. It's coming back and saying, okay, how is Spreedly handling this through their network of gateways they're working with, and can we iterate on top of that and evolve with that? And so that's, I think, what has really helped our business grow from a payments perspective, and to be flexible and to offer so many different options as the landscape continues to evolve and change, and to stay on top of that.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, Fareed, I know your experience has been implementing payments at scale throughout your career. Can you speak to us about some of the unique challenges and opportunities that you see both for Ola and other companies in implementing payments at scale?
Sure. So before we go there, I kind of wanted to talk about the options of using multiple gateways, which we're doing with Spreedly.
Okay.
And the other huge value that we're looking at from Spreedly is, and this comes back to your question on scale, is reducing latencies, right? So we've had, Spreedly's been good enough to actually partner with our fraud management system provider and have built that integration for us. So within one call, we actually get a score, a fraud score, and a routing path, right? So we are able to actually, and these are the kind of things that actually lend to building for scale, right? The whole bunch of other things that we do for scale is try and, especially around the fraud management side, try and see what we could do asynchronously before the ride, as opposed to post facto. So that helps us a lot. We've also invested heavily in optimizing our algorithms to pick the best route forward for payments as well. That's what we do in India, and we're doing globally with Spreedly to help us in our international push.
So reducing latency, optimizing success rates. Yeah, exactly. All right. Anybody else? Kevin has
Can I,
something to say.
yeah, I have questions about this, actually. So you mentioned that you're detecting fraud based on a user's behavior before they start the ride, as opposed to post facto?
Yes, that's because we actually have two steps in our app. Step one is a registration step where you actually add your payment instrument, and there we get a whole bunch of signals that we share with our fraud management system provider that helps us determine ahead of the ride if this ride is going to be risky, and based on that we would either do a pre-auth for a full amount or not do a pre-auth, and therefore be able to optimize the experience. Make sense?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Good question. Other questions? You guys take over asking the questions. I'm okay with that. So Kevin, you mentioned when we spoke last week that you had a pretty unique experience with the Spreedly implementation. Can you share that with the rest of the crowd?
Sure. So the way that we use Spreedly, I think, is a little bit different than the way that other people do. We use I believe it's called the Payment Method Distribution API. Do I have that right? Mm-hmm. Raise your hand. Awesome. Thank you. I usually have the words in front of me when I'm saying them, so it's harder when I don't have anything to look at. So we use that API, and Spreedly offers, through sort of like a common gateway, the ability for us to use Payflow. But because we had already implemented Payflow, and we had already written all the code to generate sort of Payflow protocol API stuff, we didn't have time or the desire to sort of do a second integration against Spreedly. And so the customer success team helped us out, and they built receivers for Payflow for us. They're on the website now. It looks like your documentation tracks really well against what you can do, which is really cool. And so because we can use Payflow with the Payment Method Distribution API, we don't have to change, or we didn't have to, in theory, change really very much of anything about how our integration worked. And it let us actually finish the project on time, which is great.
Thank you. So Justin, you touched on the account updater, and Bronson, I know you're also using the account updater. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what kind of results you've seen with that so far? We'll start with Bronson and then hand it off to Justin.
Yeah. Well, it was easy to get going because all we do is sign form. That's the best integration possible. And the success-based pricing was kind of a no-brainer in that we didn't have to really commit to anything if it didn't perform. So those two boxes being checked, I can't ask for a better way to get into a new service. I know I told you I'd look up results. I don't have them. I completely forgot. So sorry.
We'll come back to you on that.
It was, but it has been fruitful. We saw obviously an initial spike of success in that we ran our entire vault through and updated a lot of cards. But over time, we continue to see updates that means we're just reducing our involuntary churn and making it easier on our customers to stay customers without involved. So yeah, and the expansion of the geo coverage has helped us out as well.
Great. Justin?
Yeah, so I don't have specific ROI results. I know our bill has quadrupled since. No, in a very good way, very positive way, because so many cards are being updated. So we use it in a couple different interesting ways. So first, when we're migrating a customer, typically, if they're migrating off of their gateway onto something maybe else that we're recommending, we have a process in place to basically migrate all their live subscriptions, so that doesn't disrupt their business and so forth. And in doing so, we also migrate their last 3 months of lapsed subscriptions. These are recurring gifts that have expired, or credit cards changed, or whatever it might be. And so we're actually able to recover lost revenue for them upon migration. And so that has actually been really nice for one of our enterprise customers. When we migrated them on and ran their last 3 months of subscriptions, we actually recovered over $10,000 in subscription value. And that obviously, set us off on a good tone with that customer. And we just recently, I think within the last month or two, have started saving one-time payments, because we're going to be moving into some really cool new, easier kind of giving methods across the fundraise ecosystem. And so we've started to save one-time payments and are at the same time running those through the auto account updater. But in general, we hear, anecdotally, we hear from our customers that they feel like they're seeing less lapsed and having to spend a lot less time actually recovering lost payments. And so it's definitely been a great feature for us.
Great. Big benefit there.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we'll have a couple of minutes to let you guys in the audience ask questions of our panelists. We have a couple of microphones set up down here. If you're shy and you don't want to come all the way down, we'll also have floating mics through the audience. So we'll take a few minutes for questions here shortly. But before we do that, let me just kind of throw out a wide open question to you guys. When you think about the landscape of payments today and what's coming up in the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, what do you think your biggest challenges are going to be and the biggest opportunities for your business? Go, Kevin.
I'm making eye contact with Sean right now. I think our biggest challenge is going to be storing records of all of our payments. We write accounting entries for every single thing we do, and I think that the universe is going to run out of disk space before we've written our last entry. And I don't know what we're going to do about it yet. I think we're going to have to learn to summarize things even better than we already do.
I think Bill Gates said that back in 1980. We're going to run out of disk space. Anybody else? Fareed?
Yeah. So I think it's going to be important to pay attention to the new payment methods that are coming out. I'm not sure if most of the audience is aware, but India has a really nifty payment system called UPI. It's an account-to-account transfer, and it happens using a virtual handle. Rides on real-time settlement rails. Really cool, and we know that other countries are trying to implement other solutions in their regions. OzPayNet is trying to do something similar. So it's going to be interesting to see how all that pans out. What are the authentication modes going to be? How do we make sure that we provide a consistent customer experience across different payment methods? So those are going to be the challenges that I think we'll need to solve for.
Thanks. Bronson, Justin?
Being a subscription business, looking at and managing new payment methods as they become popular, and seeing what happens with PayPal. They're the largest payment method, I guess online payment method, single payment method. I guess if you aggregate all credit cards together, that would be larger. But they're definitely the big dog in the room. So what happens there? We've got things like Square Cash, even Venmo. Even though that's part of it, but just what comes out next, and as we swing to privacy from this kind of global, everybody shares everything's social, even cash is social, to a much more privacy-focused internet and world. How that impacts payments, and how that impacts the way that payment processors operate and how they address merchants is something I pay attention to, and why I try and keep pretty close tabs on our partners.
So yeah, I mean, I would say a couple things. One is as we, within our roadmap, we want to expand more aggressively internationally, and so I think that it's going to introduce a lot. I mean, although we are currently international, probably like 10-15% of our customer base is international today. It hasn't been like a strategic focus or target, and so we're going to run into a lot more compliance internationally than we have to really worry about today. And so that's something that we're anticipating, and we have to think about. The other thing is with payment methods specifically, it's which ones are going to stick around and actually be effective and actually take some market share away from the other payment methods out there. Because the last thing we want to do is put something out in the market that dies in 6 months from now. And so being able to have the foresight to see, yes, this is going to have traction, this is going to pick up, and really invest into those types of things. Those are I think a couple different areas that our team is excited about exploring and expanding.
Great. Definitely tracks with what we're hearing from many customers in the market. So do we have questions? Justin Benson.
I have a question around thinking about building your payment teams internally, and you guys are all different sizes and different stages, but for the benefit of yourselves and other people in the audience, how, even with such a great service like Spreedly, how do you think about building out those teams, and what's the mix of people in payments relative to your company's overall size? And then within those payment teams, how do you think about sort of pure developers versus fraud and risk versus operations? And I'm sure some of it's just finding out as you go along. So what's sort of been some of the lessons learned there in building and staffing out your teams?
Great question. So we've moved from investing in resources into plumbing to investing more resources into experience as we started the partnership with Spreedly. So that's certainly changed focus a lot, and has also helped us to optimize the size of the payments team. I think we want our brightest minds to solve for booking rides and not necessarily solve for payments, while obviously maintaining a great experience from a customer point of view, but not really getting neck deep into the plumbing of it.
Sure. So I think I was crafting my answer. I think it's kind of a three-legged stool between risk and data and product. And the way that I think of our payments team, we're building technology that is the foundation of other things that that's the foundation of upon which we can build new product features. And risk and data kind of go hand in hand in terms of limiting risk and making sure we're not getting ripped off, and also doing the analysis on historical information to make sure we're not getting ripped off. But I think that we have, the rest of the company doesn't think about payments as a thing to accommodate. The rest of the company thinks of payments as, like I said, a foundation upon which other things can be built.
So for us, we just have a few people working on the payment side, and not necessarily even full time. But one of the things I like to constantly reference, this is one of the reasons we opted to use Spreedly services, is we could be more agile in this area, so we could focus on our core competency as a business. But we had a particular customer who, Apple was like their big sponsor and said, your fundraising software has to have Apple Pay or you have to find different software. And at the time, we weren't supporting Apple Pay. And we were able to, in just a couple of weeks, basically, add that payment method within our platform, roll it out to our entire customer base at the request of one of our larger customers because of the demand that they were getting from a sponsor. And so it allowed us to really kind of respond quickly, release quickly, retain the customer, and also then downstream offer it to everyone else in the business. So I think that when we take a step back and we think at payments at large, it is definitely an important aspect of our business. It's the gateway into, no pun intended, it's the gateway into, man, this is a really rough crowd. Like, normally people laugh at my jokes, and no one laughs. Anyways, it's for us, it's the gateway when a new donor is coming to an organization, right? It's this person's entering their information. Within the payment flow, we're also doing some other cool things where we're performing a wealth screening, a demographic screening within the payment flow. So by the time the contribution is done, you're going to go back into the platform. You actually have probably about 20 different data points on the specific donor as it relates to their wealth, their income, their giving capacity, their real estate value, and all the blockchain people are freaking out right now. But it is what helps nonprofit organizations save time on research and really spend time on cultivating relationships. And so payments for us is an overall solution, an overall fundraising solution that we can offboard but give these services back to our customer base in really powerful ways. So that's kind of how we think about it.
Thank you. Anything to add, Bronson?
I like Kevin's answer. I was thinking more individual contributor type of answer where you got it's a finance responsibility, development responsibility, marketing responsibility. But you took a holistic approach with risk. I like that. I kind of came into payments as, like I said, I inherited it, and I think a lot of people end up that way. You don't study payments. You
don't get into payments on purpose.
No, we've got an idea for a product, and then we need to collect payments somehow. So it comes around somehow, and you get into this, and you see this big world that. In some ways is not it's documented in some ways, but other ways it's difficult to get your head around the different parts of it, and so I don't have a solution, but I see now, having gone through this, that I'm able to explain payment processing to the various groups within our company, and I wish I could have done that sooner. So in any way that Spreedly or anyone can help package that kind of education of payments and where the crawl, walk, run concerns should be by different teams, I think that would help any payment processing I guess nominee or willing or not voluntold person to get a little more sleep at night.
Thank you. We may have time for one more question before we wrap up. Any others? All right. Then I want to thank Justin, Fareed, Kevin, Bronson. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience. We look forward to continuing the conversations. That's what PAYMENTSfn is all about, the opportunity to talk and learn and share information and ideas with each other. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being Spreedly customers. We really appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Steve.